Welcome everyone to another episode of Leading in Wyoming, a podcast with Leadership Wyoming alumni from around the state. Today we have the real pleasure of being joined by Major General Luke Reiner, who is currently the director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation. That's a long title.
Well, it is. Thank you. Yeah.
Was that like start of your first days on the job was getting down the title?
Trying to figure out exactly who I was and what to call me.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you for giving up some of your time, not only during the legislative session, but also in the middle of winter. So two things that probably keep you on your toes this time of year.
They both certainly are. Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Well, start with many people in your own class and then also throughout the state knew you in your past position as the Adjutant General of Wyoming National Guard. And so talk about the transition of the last year. What has it looked like? What have some of the highlights been? What have some of the challenges been?
Sure.
What's it like?
Sure. You know, I've got to tell you first, obviously, thanks for taking the time to come chat.
Oh, pleasure.
And Leadership Wyoming was just a significant event in my life, as people will tell you.
Sure.
And the relationships that are formed, what we learned, what we talked about, certainly carry through the years.
That's great to hear.
And remain strong. In
Aww.
fact, just the other day down at the state legislature, saw a bunch of old Leadership Wyoming buddies.
Yeah, hopefully they were behaving themselves.
Well, they were.
Okay,
they
good.
were, absolutely. So, hey, it was a big transition. I'd served in uniform for about 36 and a half years.
Yeah.
I started as a teenager, as a private, and then, 36 years later, you retire as the commanding general here. So that was we were blessed in that career. And I was worried about taking off the uniform.
Yeah.
Just because that's really what you've done your entire life.
You just didn't know what you'd wear for clothes.
Well, it's a big decision now what to put on in the morning. So
that seems fair after 36 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but I got to tell you, first, thank you to Governor Gordon for the opportunity to serve here, and I greatly appreciate the chance to continue to serve.
Yeah.
And it's certainly continued service to the state of Wyoming. It's continued opportunity to serve the men and women, right, that work now in WYDOT orange versus, military, green.
Sure.
Or blue in the case, the Air Force. And so from that standpoint, it's still the issue of, leading a large, complex organization and really setting the conditions, right, for our most important asset, the men and women that work for the organizations to succeed. And from that standpoint, there's really, it's fairly easy transition.
Yeah, not so different.
People are people.
Yeah.
Right. Wherever
and
you
worse.
go. So now, obviously, very steep learning curve in terms of terminology and organizational culture.
Yeah. Sure.
And so you just sort of, I think, gotta, really pay attention to those issues. And I think it was important for me as I came in the door to really tell everybody, hey, listen, I'm certainly coming in from the outside. I understand that. I respect that. I will learn your culture and help me do that. And the team here certainly did. And I can't thank them enough for that and for welcoming me on board, because I think one of the most, things I've taken the most pleasure on this first year is really the teams that we've been able to form.
Oh, neat.
And just really in terms of, hey, here's the direction we want to take the organization, and here's how we want to do it, right? And here's the teams of stakeholders that we need to form. For example, I didn't grow up in the organization. And so the knowledge of what boots are on the ground out in the field, that's
been
pretty
in those
limited
positions.
for me, right?
Yeah.
And
you haven't been a plow truck driver.
I haven't. Yet is the key. Actually, I have the book to study for my CDL.
Great. Good to know.
And my goal is to get that done. Actually, I need to get it done in the next 2 years, because after that, the rules get a lot harder.
Oh,
and,
really?
Yeah, the federal government's going to bring in some more strict rules, which we're okay with.
Sure.
Because it'll make our roads safer.
Sure.
But all our snowplow drivers have CDLs.
Right.
And so no, I do want to have one.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
and I do want to go plow some snow for
yeah.
real.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And because hey, I'm an old farm boy from Nebraska. I mean, I like heavy equipment and big trucks.
Yeah.
So that's
probably you can't get interrupted by too many calls from the governor when you're out snow plowing.
Well, he may wonder what I'm doing out there. We'll have to pick the day when we do that. You just sort of sneak away.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, or maybe invite the governor to join me.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
That'd be
you
fun.
should plow the road out to his ranch. That would be really cool.
That would be.
That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I digress. Yep. Besides, but not being boots on the ground makes it harder to understand the ins and outs of the culture and the language and the values of employees.
Sure. So to help me through that,
mm-hmm.
and to help us as an organization through that, because I always think communication's a two-way street, right?
Sure.
I mean, the employees, the troops on the ground, really want to know what the director's thinking,
mm-hmm.
and I certainly want to know what they're thinking,
mm-hmm.
and so we formed what we call an employee advisory team,
mm-hmm.
and actually formed 3 of them because this organization is pretty diverse. It is more diverse than the Guard.
Sure.
And there's more stovepipes per se, and so we have one that's made up of maintainers and our construction folks really
mm-hmm.
from the field.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another one which is largely patrol, dispatch, our IT,
okay.
ports of entry, those type of folks. And then a third group that's really down here from Cheyenne and our engineers and more of our headquarters.
Okay.
And very, very different cultures between
sure.
each one of those 3 groups.
Sure.
But it has been helpful, and we've probably stood those up. I think we had the first meeting in November last year.
Yeah.
And they have been really, really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And what you quickly build is this sense of trust,
mm-hmm.
and this sense of transparency
mm-hmm.
back and forth, through the organization. And we have actually taken the challenge of fixing some policies that were identified by our employees as, hey, these policies aren't very good.
Yeah.
And so it's really been nice to tackle our compensation time
okay.
was really the first one we tackled, and we're getting ready to go live with that policy here. I think I'll probably sign at the end of the month, maybe early in March, and that will significantly change how we do comp time, right?
Yeah.
But the good thing is it wasn't Reiner and executive
sure.
staff that came up with the plan.
Yeah.
It was employees
mm-hmm.
from across the organization
mm-hmm.
Working with management to ensure that, hey, we've got the right set and we have the
sure.
right policy. And so really I see that as a huge success. And then the other good thing is just a chance to get to know, by name and personally,
mm-hmm.
some of the characters,
yeah.
men and women that are out there taking care of the business at WYDOT.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been a lot of fun.
I'm curious though, because you mentioned that structure of working groups of people who bring to you challenges or problems they want
sure.
to fix. And often it's hard to create those groups that have the transparency, but also they are things that they can affect change. That it's not just lip service to here's what we don't like. And so it sounds like you found some early wins to actually make change and demonstrate that you mean it.
Sure.
How do you do that?
To me, that was
hard.
That was really, really important, and I do see it as a process.
Mm-hmm.
So. I think when you take over an organization, it is important to make changes right away,
mm-hmm.
right? It's
mm-hmm.
really important to try and get a sense of, hey, what's important,
mm-hmm.
who's out there, where are we going,
mm-hmm.
what are the values, what are the character,
mm-hmm.
and so in the first probably 3 to 4 months, I actually traversed the entire state
mm-hmm.
and really talked to almost every employee in group settings.
Yeah.
And we took copious notes, which
mm-hmm.
really the employees, probably weren't tracking,
yeah.
and which was fine.
Yeah.
And because you wanted them to speak freely, and they did, right?
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah.
And so when we then compiled all of those and pushed them back out to the field and said, hey, listen, we've been out, we listened to your concerns, we listened to your ideas, and here they are. If we miss some, send them back to us. And so then we took that and we built a pretty nice little matrix. And then then off to the side, we built basically 4 columns. And because it is important to understand what you can affect and
Right.
what you can't.
Yeah.
And the things that you can is how do you affect it?
Right.
And so the first column was WYDOT policy, right?
Yeah.
Hey, we can affect WYDOT
Sure,
policy,
this is
right?
in our control.
That's
Yeah.
we can control. And then the next one was state policy, right?
Sure.
So that's the governor,
Can
right?
influence it,
and
but
we can certainly
yeah.
influence that, and there's mechanisms to do that. So if
Sure.
it's a personnel, you work through A&I, HRD, right? Human
Yeah.
Resources Division,
Yeah.
and so that's there. Then certainly you have state statute, right?
Mhm.
That's a little harder to influence, right?
Yeah.
Once a year, get a shot.
Yeah,
It's
maybe.
going on right
Yeah.
now, right? State legislature,
Yeah.
and sometimes you get your ideas through, and sometimes you don't,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then the fourth one was certainly federal policy, and that one's
Sure.
even harder to change than state.
Sure.
And that was, I think it's an important message to the force to understand, hey, we hear you,
Mhm.
and some things are easier to fix than others.
Right.
So let's fix the stuff we can,
Sure.
and let's start the process of fixing the things that take a little bit
More
longer,
time and more
right?
influence.
And
Yeah.
and then you've got to be, I think, deliberate about how you do it.
Mhm.
And so for the WYDOT policy, the deliberate process is employee advisory teams, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. So you get buy-in, you make a suggestion, you see it, you see the policy change in front of your eyes,
Right.
and
Suddenly you trust it.
It's a good deal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then for the really for the state level policy,
Mhm.
I am working closely with other agency heads.
Mhm.
Because I think as a collective voice, if you sit down and say, hey, here's some things that we might be able to change,
Sure.
and that might make the life better,
Mhm.
or for our employees or us all more efficient in what we
Mhm.
do,
Right.
that you can make that recommendation to the governor.
Sure.
And the other powerful thing, I think, when you sit down like that is I always invite all the stakeholders. And so as we've sat down to talk with that group of other directors, we've certainly invited the boss of A&I
Mhm.
and A&I HRD
Mhm.
to the table, and they've come.
Mhm.
And so together, I think you can sit and you can really talk over the issues and really come up with probably a palatable solution that,
Sure.
that actually stands a chance of being implemented.
Of being
right?
working its way through.
It
Yeah.
is. It's easy to whine.
Sure.
I prefer to always say, here's an issue, and here's my recommended solution.
Hmm. And I vetted it at least in these ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that it's logical and there's probably
And you make it
there's
easy
probably
for
a way
other
forward.
people to implement
Well,
it or
hopefully.
to accept it.
Right,
Hopefully
right,
so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are, I think those are some of the this has been a lot of fun building
Yeah.
those teams, right?
Yeah.
And some early positive results
Sure.
have been fun to watch too.
Yeah. But you are also working your way up the chain to that federal level. I know you testified to Congress this year about some policy. What is that like, moving from National Guard role up to DC over to now Wyoming Department of Transportation to DC? What's that feel like?
I spent far less time in DC in the current job than I did in my last.
Yeah.
And
Is
probably
that okay with you?
The last, it is a change.
Yeah.
I did enjoy my role in DC.
Yeah.
And I think it will come again with the Department
Yeah.
of Transportation. I do think that it's important to always ensure that you're grounded. In,
Sure.
It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
You got to make sure that everything's solid here on the home turf, right, before you start venturing
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
And it's very intentional to stay home
Mhm.
and to pay attention to relationships
Mhm.
within the organization and outside, within the state of Wyoming,
Mhm.
right? We got to make sure that thing's right before we start going to DC.
Yeah.
To your question about DC, so the last couple of years as a tag, I actually had an office at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And I was in and out of the Pentagon probably twice a month at least.
Yeah.
And so working national issues
Sure.
for the benefit of the Guard, and I always try to say for the benefit of the Wyoming Guard as well, right?
Right.
Air and Army, because I always think it's good for us to be at the
To
table.
be represented.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then you can influence things that make our life better.
Sure.
And I'll take that same approach with the Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to go testify in front of Senator Barrasso. It
Yeah.
was actually on my bucket list
Yeah.
to go testify nationally. It was my first time,
Yeah.
and it was very different than the state. I don't know if you've ever watched them do that testify.
A little
in
bit, but
Congress.
not much.
Yeah, there's they've got this little box.
Yeah.
And it's sitting right there on, the table in front of you as you're looking up, at this big dais. And there's 3 little lights on the box.
Yeah.
Green, amber, and red. And there's a little timer.
Yeah.
And your limit is 5 minutes.
Right.
And as soon as you start talking, the clock starts going down.
You're like, okay.
And the light is green.
Yeah.
And when it hits 1, like 1 minute left, then it goes amber.
Yellow. Yeah.
And then then comes the red.
And then the microphone gets cut off.
Right. And so I actually rehearsed quite a bit for my opening statement because I did not want to go long.
Yeah,
and it's,
you don't want to get
some
cut off before the good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Sort of look like, maybe you know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I hadn't considered, in Wyoming, you sort of went from, say, director position to director position, even though very different worlds, but the top person overseeing something. But in D.C., you went from having earned a 36-year career of earning your place at that table of decision making and dialogue to now being a new director to WYDOT. They don't care that you had an office in the Pentagon.
Sure. No, that's exactly
that's interesting.
Right. That's exactly right.
It's just so you're living in sort of different paradigms.
Right. And to me, it's chapters in life, right?
Sure.
It was a great chapter in life with the Guard, but this is a new great chapter, at WYDOT. And so, but your experiences in the first chapter, certainly, or maybe it's the second or third chapter of that portion, but it certainly affects this next chapter at WYDOT, right?
Yeah.
Just experiences enjoyed, experiences, leadership opportunities, knowledge gain.
Yeah, you don't ever go backwards in what you know and what you've experienced.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And leadership is leadership, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. I am curious, though. I think it's a unique breed of person who continuously seeks out or finds themselves in managing uncertainty. And you seem to have done that much of your career from the military side and natural disaster side and troops and lots of uncertainty and uncontrollable factors. And when we think of weather in Wyoming and travel in Wyoming, many of those things for different reasons come to mind.
Sure.
Do you think that's part of your nature, or you just happen to fall into these and figure out how to manage it? Or what is it about the uncertainty and chaos and creating sort of systems and order that you thrive on?
Sure. That's an interesting question.
Or maybe where does it come from, too?
At the Army War College, which I was privileged to spend a year at, there's an acronym, and it's called VUCA.
Yep.
Which is, you've probably heard it, right?
Yeah.
Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, right? And really, the class was, hey, listen, you got to be able to figure out how to operate in that type of environment, right? Otherwise, you will not be successful at this next level of your career, right? And so it has proved to be a fairly good fit for me. And why is that? Personality, who knows why, right?
Yeah.
And so I think part of that is, ensuring that you set the conditions for the people that work for you to know they can take, decisive action without you telling them what to do, right? And so I think you almost have to think through as, hey, listen, how do I want to make sure that we're successful in that environment? And you can't manage it.
You don't need the snowplow driver calling you for advice at midnight.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, it's all about setting left and right boundaries.
Yeah.
And saying, go, man, go.
Yeah.
Right? And I got your back.
Yeah.
And here's how I want you to think through the problems. And you are free to make the decisions that you need to make to go from point A to point B. Right? And I think it's setting that up, and then it's being willing to know that you don't always know everything that's going on, and being comfortable with that, right? And then it's the ability to quickly change priorities. It's the ability to quickly realize that the mission might have changed, and you need to change directions, and being comfortable with that, right? And so that so you just can't be so comfortable where you're at that you're not willing to change.
Sure.
Yeah.
And easy to say and hard to communicate to, I don't know, how many employees do you have at WYDOT?
We're about 2,000.
About 2,000. So, 2,000 here, 3,000 at the Guard.
Sure.
How specifically, you mentioned, letting them know, make it the best decision you can, and I've got your back. What does that tangibly look like? What does it look like to have the back of, let's say here at WYDOT, of your employees
Sure,
amid their decisions?
Sure. Well, here's an example. We close roads all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The decision to close roads is not made by me.
Oh, really?
Right?
I can't just call you and ask you to open it?
So that you
Shoot,
could
that's why I was
once,
here.
right. Maybe I-80,
Yeah.
or I-25
Yeah.
as you head north.
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. So, and we get a lot of calls.
I
Hey,
bet.
how come
Yeah.
this road's closed?
Yeah.
And it's always, hey, that decision's made locally, and because they know best,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's foremen and troopers on the ground. And so I think that's an example of, hey, that's where that decision is made, and I'm not going to second guess it.
Sure.
Now there have been times where there's been some policy issues on when we should close roads and not. That I think is within my purview to set those policies, right?
Sure.
And then based on those policies, then that's where the decision to close or not close a road gets made.
Right.
Right.
But as far as
Right.
boots on the ground making the decision, and safety is the priority.
Safety is
Yeah.
always our priority.
Yeah.
It is. A lot of that is through written guidance.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is also through verbal, right? And as we go out, we've done 2 sets of town halls, as really trying to talk about, purpose, mission, vision, end state type stuff, and hearing from the troops. But then, you meet with your key leaders regularly, just to make sure you're communicating well, and that's where you can talk about issues like this. And then a lot of that, in my mind, is it's really actions speak louder than words, right? And so when you aren't trying to micromanage, what's going on in the organization, people figure out, hey, he's really not going to do that.
Right. We have some latitude
Right,
to actually
right.
make decisions
Correct,
here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I just think that's in any large organization is really key to be able to do that.
But hard to do in the sense that you may be taking a lot of criticism from the outside, and you're holding this container, these conditions for your employees to say, I'm not going to let that affect the job that you do, and I still have trust in you. And that's, I think that's leadership.
And that's the role.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's exhausting at times, or maybe not for you.
Well,
maybe you're just used, maybe like a thick set of, armor that you wear.
I did have a disgruntled, constituent that we called, myself and my operations guy called last night about, 8 or 8:30. About a road closed.
Yeah.
So it is part of it. I do think you got to be accessible.
Sure.
I think that you can't hide behind the cloak of, hey, I'm the director. I think you got to be able to, to answer those calls.
Yeah.
I prefer that they come at a lower level, but if somebody calls you, then you need to be able to deal with it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Same day, if at all possible, right?
Yeah, that's incredible.
Right.
Is this job, somehow I would imagine, more public in some ways than the military job, just as far as what decisions you're making? It is more local, and it impacts more Wyoming folks than, say, being in Kuwait or whatever that might be.
You have a good understanding of the nature of the job.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, I was out in one county of this state, sitting down with simultaneously 5 mayors, 3 county commissioners, and probably 6 either representatives or senators, working on a transportation issue in that part of our state.
Yeah.
And that that's unique. Certainly did not do that in the Guard. But that's good.
Yeah.
Yesterday at the legislature had 5 representatives from one district in our state sit down with a concern. So it is an opportunity to work, local issues. And certainly, our focus. My focus, my job as a director is to ensure that we've got safe and effective transportation systems throughout the state, right? Whether it's ground or air or any of the items that support it, like our comms. We're responsible for our state emergency comms, or the troopers, or really all the rules about licensing your vehicle and getting driver's license.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah.
Is there anything you miss about your role with the Guard or not being in uniform?
Oh, I mean, that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
So, I think you always miss it, but it goes less
Yeah.
over time,
Yeah.
and certainly love the challenges, love the people, love the new, orange uniform
Yeah.
per se
Yeah.
here at WYDOT,
Sure.
right? So,
Yeah.
and it is, it is fun for me to learn new skills, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
to learn
To be engaged in
to
a new
learn.
world.
It's a whole new world, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's exciting from that standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
examples of, this is a kind of sidebar question, but any examples of new jargon or types of decisions being made that you would have never thought would be part of your purview or thought process, of like sand on roads or anything that feels just way out there that you're like, wow, now I have to make some decisions about this?
Well, I have learned a lot of new words.
Yeah.
I mean, you start with like asphalt's black.
Yeah. Yeah.
Concrete is white. Don't call it cement.
Right. Yeah, that
Cement's
does not
the glue
go well.
that binds
Yeah.
concrete together, right?
Yeah.
Aggregate, that's
Yeah.
engineering code for little rocks.
Yeah.
Right? And but the issues are, there's a lot of issues with those type of things, right?
Sure.
For example, there's lots of the state now where you cannot mine for aggregate based on sage grouse
Oh,
and those
interesting.
limitations, right? And
Yeah.
and so it has been fascinating to watch the interplay actually between other state agencies and state priorities.
Yeah.
We have some great partnerships with Game and Fish
Mm-hmm.
and some others like on wildlife crossing, right? This
Mhm.
whole migration corridor issue that we're working on, again, is fascinating, right? I mean, wildlife is so important to us as a state,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's really bad, like when you bump into a deer, or
Yeah.
antelope with your car, right?
Yeah, it's not
I mean,
good for
it's not
anyone.
good for your car. It's
Yeah.
really not good for the
Yeah,
animal,
no
right?
one likes that.
And so
Yeah.
really trying to, put some mitigation into those type of events too.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's been fun and not something I would have ever thought about before. About
Sure.
hey, and then the question is, we're short money for the roads, right?
Mhm.
Probably no surprise.
Mhm.
And then the discussion becomes, hey, how do you prioritize what we're
Right.
going to do on the roads, right?
Yeah,
Is it
this
better
like platform for people, for public safety.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, is it more important to maintain the stretch of road, or to build a passing lane on road X,
Right.
or an underpass for muleys on road Y?
Yeah.
And there's lots of discussion that
Yeah.
goes into that. Obviously, we have a commission, that
Mhm.
helps us with that.
Yeah.
It's one of the key differences really between the Guard and this is sort of the influence you have on the daily life of
Sure,
the average Wyoming resident,
citizen.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas at the Guard, even though with stressful and emergency situations, you're often the hero coming into the community to sort of help and be a resource and, improve the quality of what's happening for them. And
Sure.
now you're sort of
Sure.
like the pothole that's in my road,
Sure, we
is
get
the
yep,
connection
right,
point. So
right,
yeah,
right,
I can see
right,
the metric
right,
being
right,
I think, a little
right,
bit different.
Right. We still
Yeah.
want to be the heroes.
Yeah,
though,
sure,
right?
sure, yeah. Every snowplow driver that passes me, I'm like, don't look, but thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. I
Yeah.
think that there's the storm that was a couple of weeks ago that hammered Wyoming. It's incredible to see how quickly highways across the state get cleared in those conditions. It's really remarkable.
The men and women on the snowplows work really hard.
They really
And
do.
I'm really happy with how they get ahead of the storm,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
We are working with state meteorologists. It has been really, I think, a success story.
Yeah,
And so you can start pre-treating the road,
right.
and then you sort of really figure out, hey, let's just close this road.
Right, because then we can get it open faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if there's a bunch of crashes,
Yeah,
one, people get hurt
Right.
or worse,
Or
right?
worse,
And
yeah.
then it takes a lot of time to clear that debris off the road.
Yeah.
And typically the roads are closed longer.
right,
We not everybody agrees with that,
sure.
but that's probably not something we're going to change.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the fun things I've been doing with the alumni I've been interviewing is reading something from their application to Leadership Wyoming. Yours in the class of 2010.
Yeah, what a great year that was.
What a great
too.
year. And you
Yeah,
guys were pretty
absolutely.
prolific throughout the state, I would say. Oh, that's a phone.
Actually, that sounds like an emergency weather alert.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
It is snowing. I won't tell you. You can't see the snow. Do you need to go check on emergency weather alert? They'll come in.
Somebody will come running in. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Mandy.
Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah.
We need you on the snowplow.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, so one of the questions we asked on the application is, what is leadership and what is your greatest challenge in being a leader? And you wrote at this time in 2009, probably would have been, leadership is the act of inspiring and influencing people to accomplish organizational objectives while motivating them to excel, to work independently, to contribute to the overall good of a team. Which I'll just pause there and then we can talk about your challenge and see if it's still your challenge.
Okay.
But I think that phrase, to independently contribute to the overall good of a team, is such a compelling and inspiring voice of leadership, that everyone has a role to play, but collectively we're going somewhere, and it should be somewhat synchronized.
Sure.
Does that still ring true for you in this role?
That would still ring true. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the message of, that we sort of talked about. Hey, you're empowered to make the decision you make, right? Mm-hmm. And from every level of the organization, right? Mm-hmm. From the very middle to the outside.
Sure.
Right. And it doesn't change.
Yeah.
I still think of I like the Army definition of leadership. Mm-hmm. Provide purpose, direction, and motivation while working to accomplish the mission. Right. And to me that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And it's simply said, it's more difficult to execute.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of dynamic. Right. Again, people are people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
and there may be times that someone is making independent decisions that aren't contributing to the greater goal of where you want to be headed, and that's a hard line to walk as well.
Sometimes you do have to sit down and have the discussion about, hey, I'd like you to modify your behavior just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Right. I would always rather rein somebody back or provide a little bit of direction than having to push them.
Than having to prod them along.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll check in on your challenge of 10 years ago and see how you're doing.
I'm curious. I'm really curious.
You said, my greatest challenge is balancing the demands of everyday operational leadership requirements with ongoing strategic leadership project goals and timelines. So I think macro, micro sort of piece.
Sure.
What do you think?
I don't think I think that's always a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Certainly there's far less in this current job. There's far less national level issues that we're dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that could change over time. Mm-hmm. But, today there's still the issue of, we've got a disgruntled, constituent in County X, and, hey, we're trying to get, $200 million to build a road and find funding for it, right? So there's still always that difference in, hey, where should I focus my time, right?
Yeah.
And I always think that the senior leader needs to focus out. Mm-hmm. And part of my discussion, with subordinate leaders is, hey, we got to sort of understand each other's role. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if we've ever seen it. And I certainly don't remember everything I've learned in life. I wish I did.
Wouldn't that be great? My gosh!
Right. But
every lesson just really stayed with you.
Yeah, just sticks in. And, sometimes.
Check that one off. Patience, got that.
Right. Sometimes you might have to remember the bad things though, and I always try and forget those. Right.
Sure. So it's double-edged sword.
But the one organizational theory model that I just remember from school that really struck home to me was basically, it almost looks like a target, where in the middle is the men and women that do whatever your organization does. So if you're building widgets, it's the widget builder, right? Here it's probably our plow drivers and our troopers and the guys boots on the ground, and then you got concentric levels of supervision.
Sure.
And really, typically you grow from the middle and you grow out, right? Mm-hmm. And the outer rings, their job is to supervise the next ring down, right? Mm-hmm. But as you get further out on that target, in my mind, you should be looking less and less in and more out. Mm-hmm. And so I think I have a huge arrow out, which is to legislatures, to Congress, it's to the governor's office, it's to other stakeholders, with the task and purpose of looking for resources and affecting policy that affect the organization, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, as a director, you can go wherever you want in the organization, but typically, if you swoop in too low, it's a bad deal, right?
Yeah.
And so that sort of theory of how you organize has really resonated with me over the years, and is really how I try to lead and encourage others. Say, just sort of understand where you're at on in those circles, and act appropriately. Yeah.
And inward will probably feel task or operational or management, and outward will always feel like you're advocating for resources or creating a position or building respect and rapport.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think a lot of leaders, I think it's a challenge to keep those two things in check, because you also don't want your employees to feel like you're disengaged from the work they do. And so it's
life's a balancing act.
Right? There's a finite amount of time when you got to do something with it.
That's exactly right.
Yep. Any mentors or folks in your life, either military or otherwise, who have played a significant role in the leader you are, or some lessons that you sort of learned from watching others along the way?
Well, certainly you never get to where you are in life, right, without mentors. In all shapes and sizes and forms. There's certainly some that come to mind. One was a guy by the name of Larry Hearn, who I think I was probably a lieutenant, and he was a major Vietnam vet. I was a young officer growing up, and really some good mentoring and leadership learned from him. I'm not sure if you ever met him. He's still here in town.
Okay, I haven't.
So, but a great guy. But a great guy. I've had some phenomenal non-commissioned officers that have worked with over the years that really help. Sort of as you go up, in your career, fewer and fewer people will tell you things, right? And it's always important to have somebody with you that says, "Hey, sir," or "Hey, knucklehead."
Yeah.
Here's what happened. Why don't you think about this, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to have those people.
Yeah.
Certainly, father, grandfather, those type of relationships have all been significant influences in life.
Yeah. Your daughter it sounds like has followed your steps a little bit, taking a military path. Has that been fun to watch, hard to watch, interesting to watch?
Oh, it's fun, interesting. She's doing well.
Yeah.
And so she will often call, "Hey, Dad, what do you think about this?"
Yeah.
Right? "Hey, Dad, so she just took over command of a company.
Wow.
So she's a captain.
Yeah.
And she was putting out a message to her team, and so I got a little email, "Hey, Dad, here's what I'm going to put out. What do you think?" So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So she's doing well. It was we didn't let her. She was 17, and she said, "Hey, Dad, I want to join the Army."
Yeah.
And we didn't let her join right away.
Yeah.
Because she had to prove to us, Mom and Dad, right, that it's what she wanted to do.
Sure.
Not what she thought
that you wanted her.
We wanted her to do.
Yeah.
And she did.
Yeah.
And so took her down, swore her in.
Yeah. That's really neat. Yeah. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that was good.
Aww.
That was good.
Good.
Have been to every, I think, promotion that she's had since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Daughter number 2, she almost joined. I'm not sure if she will anymore.
Yeah.
But she's now a physical therapist and doing well in Laramie.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So she's in Laramie.
She's in Laramie,
so
she's close.
Great. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's good.
She and her husband. Yeah.
Kiddos come back close.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does she call you and say, "Dad, get the road open between Cheyenne and Laramie"?
She has. Yeah. Absolutely. She and her husband love to go up to Tie City and up there, and they're outdoorsmen, so they're skiing and snowshoeing and hiking. And,
neat.
And so that's the road they care about.
Yeah.
It's from Laramie up to the summit, right?
Yeah.
Right. Let's get this open, Dad.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You'll still just be the fix-it dad forever.
No,
it doesn't matter.
That's what parents are for, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, thank you for your time today, and thanks for sharing some real pearls of wisdom about your approach and what you're up to here at WYDOT as well.
Well, thank you, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And maybe what we really need to think of next. So when you were with the military, we got Black Hawk helicopters, C-130s. So what WYDOT got that we can get the class on?
Well, we got cars that go really fast. With lights and sirens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're pretty
That'd
cool.
be pretty cool.
We got big, orange snow plows.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool.
It would be pretty cool. Yeah, we should think about if there's a
Sure.
session that would fit in.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would love to host more Leadership Wyoming
that would
stuff,
be pretty
right?
neat.
Well, actually, I know our guys would love to do that because a lot of times it helps. It helps recruit. It helps positive image. Our numbers are coming up on troopers. We about 3 years ago we were probably about 40 short.
Yeah.
State compensation's just been tough.
Yeah. And national rhetoric too hasn't made it easy.
National rhetoric has not helped.
Yeah.
So, but I tell you, the troopers sort of decided themselves, hey, this is no good, and they've been really sort of internally recruiting people that they know and trust and think,
and being an
hey,
advocate.
Man, you'd be a great recruit. You'd be a great trooper. Why don't you come on over and test?
Taking ownership for
it. It has been the results. We aren't quite full. We're probably about 10 or 12 down now, but we're going in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll give some thought to that if there's a place that we can include that where they could do a ride along. And that'd be really neat.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Awesome.
And anything I can do, as Luke Reiner or as director of WYDOT, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Well, just keep those roads open.
Okay. Yeah.
You're like,
good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
You're
and
like,
which one specifically?
Yeah. More specifically, which one do you need to get home? Well, what I want to see is the photo of you and Governor Gordon snow plowing your way to his ranch. That's what I want to see.
Hey, Governor, man, I'm coming over.
Yeah.
I'm in a snow plow, man.
Yeah, you want to ride? Or like the football teams when the airport gets snowed in or whatever, and some people with snowmobiles take the Broncos to DIA or something like that.
Yeah.
That'll be the legislature snowed in and you're out picking everyone up in the snowplows to bring them to Cheyenne.
Or plowing a road for them to follow.
Yeah. Just be a line of cars down I-25.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. Clearly, these are the issues you're worried about.
I can just imagine the governor saying, "You did what?"
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Hey, boss. I'm leading from the front.
Yeah, that's right. Literally.
Right?
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's what that's what we do.
Yeah. We're making a difference here. Thanks everyone for joining us in Leading in Wyoming. We'll be back next week with a few more episodes. So thank you. The Leading Wyoming podcast is possible thanks to the generous support of the Wyoming Dragisevich Foundation and the Wyoming Community Foundation.